Throughout the world, there may be many people going about their daily lives unassuming, but they could be changing history and not knowing it. Accidental inventions and discoveries often lead to immense progress in many different fields, and who knows, there may be someone out there that has a cure for cancer that could save millions and millions of people's lives. This is a true story of a man who was unassuming and lived a rather quiet life, but he noticed something that prevented the spread of a deadly disease. Benjamin Jesty was a farmer from the village of Yetminster and Worthmer-Travers, and he noticed that the deadly disease of smallpox could be prevented. Smallpox was a harrowing disease that throughout the centuries kept coming around and taking the lives of people. Queen Elizabeth I, the final Tudor monarch, even suffered with the condition, and it affected anyone. It was later the work of Edward Jenner, which is celebrated with beginning the eradication process of smallpox in England and in Britain. Jenner is often said to have noticed that milkmaids did not get smallpox, as they got cowpox instead, and from this he then injected people with cowpox, so they then didn't get smallpox, the more deadly disease. I hope you can understand this. But what if the work of Edward Jenner was actually based upon the work of a farmer in Dorset, who doesn't get any of the credit for curing one of the world's deadliest diseases? Benjamin Jesty was a farmer all his life, and he was living during the 18th century. At this time, smallpox was widespread across England, and it did keep coming back. But in dairy farming regions, such as this one, in the south coast of the country, it was known that milkmaids and other workers contracted cowpox as they were handling the udders of cows, and they would then be immune to smallpox. This was known about, and we're talking about a time 20 years before Edward Jenner's work to cure smallpox. These people would then be able to nurse and help smallpox victims in the local area, and they knew they could not get the disease. Now, this idea was spread around amongst medical thinkers, but the farmer Benjamin Jesty went further. He and two of his female servants had been infected with cowpox, but when the epidemic of smallpox came to Yetminster, the local village, in 1774, Jesty tried to give his wife Elizabeth and his two sons immunity by deliberately infecting them with cowpox. He took the family to a cow at a farm in the nearby village of Chetnole that had the disease, and he then used a needle and transferred the pus from the cowpox sores of the cow into his family by scratching on their arms. He then rubbed the pus in. The boys had a little bit of a reaction, and his wife's arm did become rather swollen, but then they recovered. Now, in the village, Benjamin Jesty's little experiment shocked and horrified the locals. He was said to have been inhuman and was vilified, allegedly being hooted at and reviled and pelted whenever he attended markets in the neighbourhood. The people of the local area hated the fact that this farmer had introduced an animal disease into a human, let alone his own family, and some believed that his family would transform into some beast. However, what Benjamin Jesty demonstrated was that when his two sons later were exposed to smallpox, they failed to catch the deadly disease. He had accidentally and unassumingly made a medical breakthrough 20 years before Edward Jenner did exactly the same thing, rubbing the pus from cowpox into wounds to deliberately infect and then to protect from the more deadly disease. Jesty was overshadowed by Edward Jenner, who was given a huge reward of £10,000 from the House of Commons, and then another award of £20,000 for his work in promoting vaccination. Jesty later was proposed as the first vaccinator, and the man who should have received some of the reward, if not all of it, but he was later given a pair of gold lancets for his work. The papers to help Jesty claimed he was led to undertake this novel practice in 1774 to counteract the smallpox, at that time prevalent at Yetminster, where he resided, from knowing the common opinion of the country ever since he was a young boy, now 60 years ago, that persons who had gone through the cowpox naturally, i.e. by taking it from the cows, were unsusceptible of the smallpox. Didn't they talk a lot of nonsense back in the day? What's wrong with saying, you got cowpox, you couldn't get smallpox? He found that. On the 15th of July 1806, a sermon was preached in the honour of Benjamin Jesty, and it stated, the discovery of the efficacy of cowpox against smallpox is so forgotten by those who have heard of the Dr. Jenner. Benjamin Jesty died on the 16th of April 1816, and he was buried in a prominent position in his local church. His gravestone marks his work, saying, "He was born at Yett Minster in this county, and was an upright, honest man, particularly noted for having been the first person known that introduced the cowpox by inoculation, and who from the great strength of his mind made the experiment from the cow, and on his wife and 2 sons in the year 1774. Benjamin Jesty was a humble farmer first. He was not a doctor, was not a politician either, but he noticed something that would later change the face of English history and would save the lives of many. He didn't shout about his discovery, but protected his children and wife from a deadly disease, and this experiment would later make another man incredibly famous and wealthy. Benjamin Jesty is the man who could have saved the world from a deadly disease, but preferred to farm his fields, looking after his family, and he waited for someone else to take his little experiment just that little bit further. What a remarkable story. There could be someone out there who's trying to cure cancer in a way, and they may have done it, but they might have no means of expressing it to the world. What a brilliant story.